Hello, it's Claire from CF McEwen. That's me holding a silkworm for the first time. I'm in Hoi An Silk Village in Vietnam, where they preserve the traditional methods of sericulture, the rearing of silkworms for silk production. In the garden they grow mulberry trees, whose leaves feed the little silkworms. They will eat nothing else, and you can't trick them. Leaves are collected every day whilst the worms are growing. Here you can see how they only eat the tender part of the leaf, leaving the vein of the leaf behind. The worms are about 10 to 12 days old at this stage. They're hatched originally from an egg laid by the female moth, the egg the size of a pinhead. They grow and eat for about 30 days, building up their energy reserves for the pupa stage, which is when they begin to spin their cocoon. This clip shows the worms starting to pupate. They're at the early stages of spinning their silk cocoon, making a figure of 8 action with their head. The cocoon will be made of one long continuous strand of silk, up to about 1.5 kilometres long. The cocoons will vary in colour from cream, yellow and white, depending on the genetics of the worm, and will take 2 to 3 days to complete the cocoon around themselves, which acts as protection while they metamorphosise into a moth, and if allowed to, will hatch out in about 2 to 3 weeks' time. In commercial sericulture, the cocoons are prevented from hatching and boiled in order to remove the one long strand of silk intact. 6 to 20 cocoons will create one silk strand strong enough for weaving, depending on the weight of cloth required. The silk fibre is extracted and pulled up into the spinning wheel and spun to produce the first stage of silk yarn. It is possible to produce what's known as a shima silk or piece silk, where the moths are allowed to hatch and break out of their cocoon to live out their full cycle. A shima silk is more typical in southern India and was promoted by Gandhi, who was critical of the traditional silk production methods. The first batch of spun silk from the cocoons is very coarse and reminds me of horsehair. On further boiling and washing, the silk will be degummed and softened to be the silk that we know. At the Silk Village, I met a brother and sister from a Champa family, one of Vietnam's 54 ethnic minorities. They work on the traditional looms at the village and demonstrate designs unique to the Champa people, who are famous for the narrow lengths of colourful silk cloth. Villages across Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia are preserving the knowledge of natural dyeing to colour the yarn ready for weaving. Examples include indigo, jackfruit, lilac tree, elderberries, banana leaf, resin from lac bugs and madder root. The yarn is boiled in the water with the dye and fixed with a mordant such as vinegar and salt. In another silk village in Cambodia, I was able to observe the stages behind ikat weaving. The yarn is knotted into a pattern before dyeing. The sections of yarn that are tied resist the dye from colouring the fibres, as shown in this purple cloth. You can see the white sections are where the yarn was tied. The next stage is to weave the dyed yarn into cloth. If you look closely at the yarn being woven here, you can see how the dyed and undyed sections are lined up on the loom. The weavers work at speed, moving the boat shuttle of yarn back and forth across the loom, the weaving of the warp and weft in action. It's goodbye now to the little silkworms. It's been such a pleasure to meet them and get to know them and understand the important role that they play. I'll leave you with a performance by local musicians on the banks of the River Mekong in southern Vietnam.
Từ sáng tới giờ, cháu suy đã lầm bằng mấy cú